Hello humans. Hello humans. Yet another day in the trenches. This is about spilling. We live in an electric universe. Electricity is a modality of the ether, just like magnetism. There's very few modalities of the ether. The ether can be thought of mechanistically. Its mechanistic aspect can be thought of as pressure gradients, as though a fluid. So we can think of the ether as expressing the qualities that we find in fluids in the material. These fluids derive from the condensate of the matter that is energy that condenses into the material. So it's fitting that they should replicate at least some aspect of the greater ether that they descend from. So our electric universe, operating in a pressure gradient kind of or extracted from or oozing from the pressure gradient aspects of the ether, causes things to occur. So we have the ocean, the continental shelf, and we have all of the water in the ocean. And curiously, we find that we have charge, electrical charge, concentrating over here all along the edge of the boundary between the water and the land, and absence of charge in the middle band of the ocean. So our oceans are basically a giant battery, and if we were to do an anode and a cathode, we could extract electricity from the oceans. They're just a big battery. Okay, so this this gradient spread of charge through the ocean contributes to the action of waves. Doesn't cause waves. Waves are primarily a physical force motion caused by wind across the surface of the water. However, the electrical nature of the water contributes to the variety and effect of the waves. I won't go into too much detail on it because it gets into some really squirrely kind of electricity issues, but here's the thing. There's quite a few different kinds of waves, okay? There's waves that come on up and then they just sort of sag out. And there's waves that we see typically that come on up, and then these are the type that we call plunging waves, where the wave comes on up and it gets all frothy and it collapses like that, and it forms the tube that you would, guy would surf in, right? So you'd surf through that tube, and that tube is caused by a plunging wave. Now, a plunging wave rises on up for its whole length, and so it might be 100 feet coming at the beach, right? This force of wave. And so and the beach is over here. And the wave comes down this way, it's all traveling at the same speed, more or less, and this plunging wave will plunge. It'll do this action right here. It'll rise up into a crest, the crest will break, and it will plunge that whole distance basically all at once. These are the kind of waves where you get a whip, kind of a crack noise when you're down on the beach. It'll literally sound like a huge giant rifle shot or a giant whip, because it'll be hundreds of feet at a time just plunging over, right? Okay, so those are not typical, not on my beach anyway, and not on most beaches. They require a specific set of force conditions coming in, a certain amount of force, and a certain electrical condition to cause this cresting action to occur, and cause it to occur for the entire length of this, all right? So there's another kind of effect that you also get this. All right, so you can surf a plunging wave, but usually you get a little bit into it and it crashes over you and tumbles you all about and throws you on the sand and you've got new marks on your face, right? Okay, so the better type is called a spilling wave. Now a spilling wave still does this. It still crests, right? It still crests and starts spilling, where the flow of the water seemingly comes up and then falls over as though on a waterfall or something. It crests and that crest breaks, but it doesn't plunge. The whole wave doesn't plunge. What happens is that the wave starts running. One edge, and probably two edges more frequently, will start this spilling action, and as the waves are coming this way, you also get this effect of the spill running either direction or both directions. Frequently it happens both directions at the same time. The long waves will break on the edge. They'll come up to the crest and break and then start spilling and reach towards the middle. Now these are the second best kind of waves to ride as a surfer. Because if you're riding them either direction, you know you're going to get hammered in the middle, right, when it finally crests over you, unless you can duck out, which is very rare. So a dual spill is the second best. A single spill, where it's only running from one side all the way to the other, is the best wave to surf, because you get up here in this hump of the water here, and you're riding on that, and you can ride this whole distance, right, and then pop out the other end, because you get out there just ahead of the thing crashing over you, and that's really cool. All right, so that's the difference between and then there's, you know, standing waves, all different other kinds of waves, but this is the difference between a plunging wave and a spilling wave, which a spilling wave is plunging, but it doesn't do it through the whole length. It spills out. Okay, so these effects of plunging and spilling and the other standing waves and so on are replicated in our universe in various different ways, because our materium is based on the ether and derives itself from the ether, and the ether acts in many ways as though it was a fluid, and so we get analogs of plunging and spilling waves in various different forms. So a spilling wave analog in electricity is a continuous short. At a low amperage that doesn't trigger anything, right? That would be a continuous spill of electricity. You even have these things naturally at times. A plunging wave, of course, would be a electrical shock, and it shuts down the system. It all plunges all at once. So it's getting hit with a shock at that point. Now, I find that it is helpful to think about events and actions and things in the materium relative to humans doing shit as though it is meaningfully motivated by the same kind of dynamics that we see around us in the rest of our electrical universe. So in that sense, I find it helpful to examine what we're doing as humans, and then see if we can harmonize with some of these inbuilt forces, right? So it's difficult to find good examples at this stage, but we're in now a spilling wave. Okay, so we're at one end of a single direction spilling wave. We'll do it this way. And so we're over here. You are here, and our spilling wave is running this way through time, and it's filling up and it's spilling events. And so these events are spilling out of our wave as we go through time, and we're starting off in December 1 here. And we'll just put this down here as 1 March. So time is going to affect humans and move us, because in the same way that energy moves water molecules in order to create the spilling wave. So we will be creating events, we are creating events, interacting and causing all these things to occur that are spilling out over this next period of time, and they're happening already now. So for instance, every day now we get new breakdowns within the MSM, within the corporate media, being able to control the narrative. The narrative is actually breaking down. Even the World Economic Forum, they've got they canceled their get-together. They're canceling a lot of their stuff because they're seeing that the populace is getting wise to them, and that we're not going along with their horse shit, right? That they've got real opposition here. Opposition to all of this stuff is rising up around the world, and we're now entering into the part of the war where the powers that be had our governments attack the populace, and in a sneak attack. Hang on. Sneak attack, like Pearl Harbor. Now, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was a known thing from the government. It's another put-up job, right? They did that to get us to attack Japan. They allowed that to occur. They could have stopped it at any time. All they had to do was to let Japan know that we knew they were coming and we were going to wait for them and get their ships, and they would have turned around and gone back. So they need not have ever engaged them. All they need to have done was to leak out to the Japanese that we had forces waiting to capture them, right, or to assault them before they got to Pearl Harbor. And the Japanese would have turned around. They are risk avoiders, the Japanese. Anyway, though, so now we have the powers that be as government performing a sneak attack on the populace. The populace is wising up. The populace is wising up in the form of a spilling wave. More and more people every day are wising up and falling off of the wave that supports the powers that be into freedom, and they're no longer part of the problem. Now they're starting to become part of the solution, right? So the powers that be, the government, is finding that they're having to react to humanity in a different way. They used to think of humanity as basically like a big pool of sludge that they would push this way or push that way, okay? And we don't have that anymore. Now we've got a very frothy mix. We've got our fermentation in humanity. It's got a lot of air bubbles in it, all kinds of gas, all kinds of misinformation, disinfo, all kinds of horseshit. But in there is a giant mess of truth that's all bubbling up and frothing, and it's it's getting explosive. And so the powers that be are no longer able to push on a sludge and have the whole mass move over there, right? And in fact, they've gotten to the point now where they push on what used to be the sludge, and they just keep going in because the mass is so airy, it parts ahead of them and sucks them in, and they don't like that. And we're seeing this effect with Ghislaine Maxwell trials, and how there were 700 more flights that were shown, leaked out, all different kinds of leaks coming out everywhere from various different things. So now it's leaked out that the media wanted to dox the jurors in the Rittenhouse trial, so the media was deliberately acting, I think it was NBC, but I'm not sure, acting illegally. They made an illegal move. And so now will the judge censure them? Will he go and slap these fuckers with obstruction of justice or other charges? He may well. And so you can charge an organization with obstruction of justice and lay out a RICO case for that exactly. And so they may do that. But anyway, all of these leaks are spilling out. This spilling wave, this spilling woo, is a modality of ether running through humans. So in other words, energy comes from universe. It comes into the materium here in the form of a pulse. We turn it in pulses into all different kinds of motions, but mainly impulse drives everything in our reality, and our materium is impulse. It goes through our blood, our lymph system. It makes our eyes work, all of this kind of stuff, right? So this energy coming in, transferring into basically a spilling wave, of events is operating through humans the same way that energy from the wind operates through the water. So we as individual humans will do things as in our individual needs, wants, desires, and so on, but we as a modality of universe are cooperating unbeknownst to ourselves in a larger evolution, in a larger picture. So we are like one brush stroke, and we can't see the picture that our brush stroke is in. But it is helpful to know that we are part of a changing dynamic of the picture, right? Our brush, as a brush stroke on a giant picture that is humanity, we are participating in this current series of events, in this spilling woo that's going to take us through for years and years and years, but we're going to concentrate in this period right here through some really tumultuous times. And all right, so in the French Revolution, where they were chopping people's heads off with guillotines and all this kind of stuff, we find, and actually in all revolutions, we find that everything is episodic. It is pulsed. Right? There's a pulse of activity and then a pause. A pulse of activity and a pause. So they chop off a bunch of heads, and then everybody's got to go home and, and think about it and all this kind of stuff. Then they got to go round up some other people to chop off and so on. So there's this pause pulse thing. It operates throughout all of our world. But there are times when the pauses are very, 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 very short. Okay, electrically you can change the timing involved in any electrical activity and shorten or lengthen the time from a charge to a discharge. And that's what universe is doing with us. Universe has decided that this period right in here is going to have very, 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 very short pauses, if any, and that we would be able to detect. They will be there, but we won't necessarily be able to detect them because our consciousness would be such that we're going to be overwhelmed with all of the activity, all of the pulses. So, in general, spilling waves are elegant, smooth, beautiful to see from the outside, but when you're in them, it's chaotic, it's tumbling, it's destroying the beach, it's moving the kelp underneath, it's changing the sand, it's revealing shells, it's digging up creatures, it's exposing crabs, all different kinds of stuff, because the spilling wave comes over and digs its way into the sand as the energy runs on up the beach. And so we're in that kind of a time right now. So there'll be all kinds of shit that's put up into the woo, and the woo will be very dirty and very difficult to discern things. All right, so now it's all right, so we can get so we'll look at some of these disturbances that are out there, okay? So there's been a meme that I now think is being directed, that is to say probably run by the CIA or one of the bad guys, one of the organizations that is inimical to humans. There's a meme out there about these med beds, right? And this meme goes through Simon Parkes and Charlie Ward. Now they have now someone has put some time into crafting, it looks like a blender, that's a software, a blender animation of a med bed, right? Of a idealized understanding of a med bed. Now the idea of a med bed is a medical bed that you would lie in, that you would be healed energetically, okay? Well, we live in an electrical universe, and so if a med bed is going to heal you, it will be doing so through electricity. There are no other rays, there's no other energy. You can't use electricity in any kind of a device to change key or consciousness other than to kill someone or zap them at a gross level. You are not able to alter prana, chi, ki in the human body. You can't alter life force in the human body, which is at its core expressing electrically, but it is deeper because it goes through and is bound consciousness, spirit to matter. Okay, so it's deeper than electricity within the ether. And so you can't deal with the body as though it was a piece of metal with an electrical charge on it. It does not work that way. Now, these ideas of med beds My thinking is interesting on this to myself, because I've been squirreling and diving down into the deep rabbit holes on this as to who, why, and what would be the goal of all of this brouhaha and putting money into the idea of these mythical medbeds. They don't exist. You know, Simon Park's organization, Connecting Consciousness, is a bunch of horse shit. They don't have med beds. No one's giving them med beds. Whatever his claims are, they are lies. These med beds do not exist. You're not ever going to be able to get a 20-minute trial of a med bed. All of this is clickbait. All of this is giant horse shit for somebody's game, for somebody's agenda. Simon Parks, he's an aggrandizing, self-aggrandizing fellow and has issues and so on. So he's got his own shit going with this weird medbed scam, right? And he's connected with Charlie Ward, and I think Charlie's also scamming on the medbeds, but I'm not really sure how they intend to, you know, benefit from this other than maybe in their own squirrely little internal world. But there are no medbeds coming out because of the very nature of electricity and the human body. And so here's another aspect of this. So we have, all right, so we have spike proteins, we have the graphene, we have the nanoparticles, and the encapsulated other material that we're just not quite sure of that are in the shots, right? And the people that get them are spreading the spike proteins for sure. All right, this is a for sureness. However, it is possible that they're also shedding graphene, although this is less likely, and it's difficult to see a pathway that could occur. It's also less likely that they're, slightly less likely that they're shedding nanoparticles. I could see the nanoparticulates, but I can't see the body making any nanoparticulates because there's no instructions in any of the material that they send in for your body to keep creating the nanoparticulates. But I do understand that you could be breathing them out and so on for the duration that they're in your body until they get out. The spike proteins are a different matter. If your body makes the spike proteins and learns how to make them, then you'll shed them as long as it knows how to make them. The graphene, which is an oxide, I can't find any record that I won't go into it, but the thing about the hydroxide may be bogus. And the supposed dead German doctor. I don't find validation for that. And the local cops are saying, no, nobody's been killed, no reports of murder, any of this sort of thing, right? So anyway, the graphene oxide is not likely to be shed. There may be some component that we're just not aware of that is being transmitted somehow, but so far I'm just going to table that and say that it's not possible. So now it is feasible, and I have encountered this, where you get spike proteins, and I, for instance, had a 2-hour nosebleed being around a woman that had been vaccinated the day before. And so she was definitely shedding like mad, and that really screwed up my my system for a day. But I took a bunch of chaga and NAC, N-acetylcysteine, and it was fine. Anyway, though, so the spike proteins are getting in people. It is true that they have a tendency to go towards the organs, okay, towards the heart, the spleen, the liver, this kind of thing, ovaries, testes, these sorts of things, and brain, all right? And so you'll see out there interviews in which there's discussions of people using different approaches to get at these things energetically. And so I don't know what mechanism for display might exist with very sophisticated ultrasounds, but it is very feasible that ultrasound would indeed be able to break up spike proteins. This is because the nature of the wave penetrating through the body to get up to where the spike is, and then the wave literally just breaks the protein up because it just breaks it down into its constituent parts, and you shed it, right? You either pee it or shit it out. So it's feasible that you could use an ultrasound to get rid of spike proteins. You can get ultrasounds that are powerful enough that you can actually have them the Russians used this for a while. I don't know if they still do. They had these plates. They involved wax in the production of them, but that's really all I remember about them. And you'd lie down on the plates, and they would do an ultrasound over you in specific areas, and then they'd get impressions in the plate that you'd been lying on that helped them diagnose stuff, right? So they had ultrasounds that were powerful enough to go through you without causing damage. So they were a good approach. Anyway, though, so ultrasound could indeed, as a pulsing wave, break up a protein. You can do that. You can use ultrasound to break up kidney stones and gallstones, these kind of things. So this is a known effective technology. So I see no problem with this. I think some people have been having treatments to this effect, right, to get rid of the spike proteins that they're picking up from the people around them. Now, my approach is to use chaga and vitamin D and NAC to do this, because chaga and vitamin D alter the charge in my body, and so it repels the spike protein. So the spike protein is basically, we see this little thing as a bunch of little dots when they show it, and it sort of looks like it has a little spike. The issue with the spike protein is its electrical charge, right? It is in a state of discharge, and so it wants to attract itself to charge. And so now I have not validated this, I've just been told this, but I hear that Wano Saban was talking about manufacturing anti-static clothing to repel spike proteins. And it's like, I don't think that's a good idea, the anti-static clothing. And here's why. The spike protein is in a state of discharge, and it wants to get close to charge. So we can think of that as being in a negative state of charge, and it wants to attract itself to a positive state of charge. Our bodies would have a state of a charge that would attract the spike proteins. Our bodies would have a state of charge in all of it through the respiratory system, etc., that is different from millimeter to millimeter to millimeter, depending on what's going on in our body at that point. So I'm at a very basic level, I think it's not wise to mess with things at a large gross level affecting the charge of the human body. In other words, you don't want to be messing with your static charge generally. You need the body to maintain that static charge in order to be healthy. You need a specific level of charge on your cells such that when the spike protein is attracted to it, it gets zapped by the electrical nature of the cell there. And that is controlled by vitamin D and chaga and these kind of supplements. They alter the electrical nature of your body cell by cell by cell, as opposed to trying to do it with a coat or a pair of pants or something, right, and just do it over that region. The other aspect of that is that you're going to make the body work harder. Wherever anti-static clothing comes in contact, the body has to work harder to maintain a normal electrical charge. And so you'll find people that have to do, humans that have to do electrical work where they're bound by anti-static things. So they're constantly bleeding off their static charge in order to handle chips and stuff for the nature of their work for a number of hours a day. You will find that these people will develop health problems over time as a result of that continuous drain of a normal static charge. So, in my opinion, this is not wise, okay? Also, in my opinion, Simon Parks and the medbed things is a giant scam, and that I do not see how they are benefiting does not mean that it's still not a scam. All right, so now we're into the spilling wave period, and we're already seeing some UFO shit pop up in here, but I suspect that, so this December 1, and I suspect here by the 11th to the 12th, we'll have the first of a major series of crises as our spilling events reach a point to where they're going to plunge over, okay? They're up there and they're spilling and then they're going to plunge. And so I think that we're going to have the first of these around the 11th or the 12th. It'll be difficult to tell it as it arises unless it comes up really sharp and jumps way high relative to the other events, because there's going to be so much of this stuff spilling out all over. All right, so we're going to get into in the data sets. All right, so in the data sets from 2003 onward, we had this slowly developing thing about a pogrom. Pogrom is where the organized social order hunts out a particular kind of individual within its social order. So we're in the pogrom now in the sense that the minority that cheated its way into control is trying to hunt out the majority. See, that won't work. That's not going to happen that way. There will be a flip on this, and in fact it has flipped, because we're starting to see all the people resign and all of these kind of things, right? But that pogrom language I find to be a key element going forward, because within the old data sets there were a certain set of there was a certain group of supporting primary attributes to larger sets that point to the concept, the idea of humanity having a pogrom against central banks. Okay, so not against people, but the idea that we would have a hatred for central banks. That this is a difficult idea to get across, because, you know, really a central bank, who gives a shit, right? You don't have any emotional upwelling or any of that kind of stuff that in any way makes you hate, comes up to that level of rises to that level of emotionality about the abstract of an institution. So pogroms are usually applied, and they usually go through xenophobia. Okay, you don't look like me, so I'm afraid, so I'm going to be, aggressive, right? And that's xenophobia, basically. But in the data sets, it was always really interesting, because the pogrom develops as like there's a step. So something happens, we take a step into a pogrom where all of a sudden humanity is faced and turned on all these central banks, or is turning, because humanity is big, it'll take us fucking forever to do so. But over a relatively short period of time, enough people become very aggrieved with the central bank that the central banks have problems. And so maybe, just maybe, we might have that occur because of the rising tension levels that are going to strike us around the 11th or 12th. And these rising tension levels will continue for some period of time. So it'll keep getting, we'll keep getting more tension from the 11th and 12th. It'll keep going out, but it rises up very steeply to keep going out. The cause of it may be whatever it is that sets humans against the central bank. This is a very, very, very interesting time relative to the data sets, because within that time is also the assault on the Vatican, and within that period of time is the liberation of hidden secrets revealed about UFO crap that comes out from Maryland, Delaware, somewhere in there, right? And it also leads over to the West Coast and all of the hidden bases that are dealing with UFO tech and all of the subcontractors and those sorts of things, right? So those two real key things, the assault on the Vatican, which releases all of this stuff about religion and changes the nature of humanity's thinking about religion over the course of the next couple of hundred years, these events are cross-linked to the rise of the pogrom around central banks. So we know that central banks, in fact, the Vatican, I mean, they're all interrelated. We don't have central banks without having had the Vatican first, that sort of a thing, right? And the central banks are deep into paying for the suppression of and the analysis of UFO tech. So they're all interrelated at very deep levels. Anyway, so around the 11th or 12th, we're going to have a building set of crises. The emotional tension language ramps right on up. Maybe we're starting at the 9th or something. It's difficult to do granularity at that level. It's just that there's a visible peak that can be picked out that starts on the 11th or 12th and then rushes us out. I think, there's some small hints that it's tied to this period of time of the development of this attitude against the central banks. This is if this is the time, then it is the beginning of a number of years of secrets revealed, and I believe we are there now. And this is a great thing for humanity. It's a terrible thing for humanity because we're going to have secrets revealed to us that are very ugly and very terrible. But it's very great for us because it's misogi, it's purification. You can't heal yourself from an infection until you get the infection out, until you take some action to get the infection out. And so we're in that process of taking that action. So this is an active phase, an interesting time for that. Anyway, I'm looking for UFO stuff, so because that's what I'm focused on. And so I'm going to be looking through this period of time for other things that will focus on those two elements, right? Because, all right, so I'm focused on the Vatican because I know Mauro Biglino. Okay, he's a linguist. He was paid by the Vatican for over 20 years to translate source material. Mauro is a man of very high integrity, and he was like basically held prisoner in the Vatican catacombs there with all that material for 20 years translating all of this stuff. His translations will not be released in the main through the Vatican because of what he discovered, right? That their translations of the Bible and all of the source material and all the ancillary stuff that they have is deficit from reality. I mean, it is skewed so far that it doesn't relate to the reality of the underlying source material at all. And it gets really squirrely in terms of the nature of what they're hiding and this sort of stuff. And as I say, it'll take us hundreds of years to sort all this stuff out. But Mauro's work points to the gigantic level of obscured, because they obscured it through translation and transliteration, UFO nature of material in the Bible. So if you look at the way in which, if you look at the Mauro's translation, you find that a significant percentage of the source material that the Catholic Church has taken for all of the Bibles since way back when relates to UFOs. And some of it's even warnings about dealing with the fuckers. Anyway, though, so these kind of things will be coming out. I suspect we're in that period of time of secrets revealed. If it's not the 11th or 12th, it might be into January, it might be into February. These are, it's not able to be determined that accurate. If it doesn't come out on the 11th or 12th, there will still nonetheless be some level of rising tension. Maybe it'll be Ghislaine Maxwell stuff, maybe it'll be our Cuban Missile Crisis analog, those sorts of things, right? Anyway, we live in an electrical universe. I'm of the opinion you don't want to be monkeying with the electrical state of your body, and you sure as fuck don't want to let an idiot like Simon Parkes put you into any kind of a contraption and turn on any kind of juice to send it through you. Look at the logic of this, all right? So what if he said it came from space aliens? You're going to trust space aliens? Or you're going to get into that little thing and think it's going to cure you, and it might be a microwave for toasting up the human hot dogs? So anyway, watch your electrical charge, guys. That's why chaga is so good. That's why the scientists, the academics, don't know shit about its ability to regulate our network of systems, because they're not looking at it as a network. They're looking at it as individual cells, not seeing the surface of charge across the nature of all of the cells. But chaga helps you regulate your electrical charge at a very great level. Okay, off to work.